The moment General Morrison's hand twisted into Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez's hair, pulling her head back in front of 500 assembled soldiers, time seemed to freeze on forward operating base Courage. The silence was deafening, broken only by the desert wind whipping across the compound and the collective intake of breath from every man and woman watching this unprecedented violation unfold before their eyes. What happened next would become legend, whispered in barracks from Afghanistan to Germany, a story that would redefine what it truly means to serve with honor. Maria had been in the Army for 8 years, rising through the ranks not because of politics or connections, but because she bled green and lived by a code that put her soldiers first. Always. Her father had been a Vietnam veteran who came home broken, spending his nights staring at walls, and his days trying to forget what he'd seen in the jungles of Southeast Asia. She'd watched him struggle with demons she couldn't understand, and it was his pain that drove her to serve, to be the kind of leader who would never abandon her people the way he felt abandoned by his country. That morning started like any other, with Maria leading her squad through training exercises, her voice carrying across the dusty training ground as she pushed her soldiers to be better, stronger, ready for whatever hell awaited them beyond the wire. General Morrison had arrived at the base 3 weeks earlier, a political appointee with more connections than combat experience, and his reputation preceded him like a toxic cloud. The stories followed him from base to base. Inappropriate comments to female soldiers, abuse of power, a man who wore his stars like a crown instead of carrying them as responsibility. Maria had heard the whispers, seen the fear in the eyes of younger female soldiers when his name was mentioned. But she'd also seen something else, the resignation, the acceptance that this was just how things were, that speaking up meant career suicide. She'd bitten her tongue, focused on her mission, tried to keep her soldiers safe while navigating around this dangerous man. But some lines can't be uncrossed. Some moments demand a choice between safety and what's right. The incident began during what should have been a routine morning formation, 500 soldiers standing at attention in the blazing Afghan sun. Maria's squad had performed flawlessly during the previous night's patrol, bringing back critical intelligence that would save lives, and she stood proud among her peers, her chest decorated with ribbons that told the story of courage under fire. General Morrison was conducting his weekly inspection, strutting down the lines like a peacock, when he stopped in front of Private Jenny Chen, a 19-year-old kid from Oregon who'd joined the Army to pay for college. Jenny's uniform was perfect, her posture rigid, but Morrison found fault anyway, his voice rising as he berated her for an imagined infraction, his words growing more personal, more inappropriate with each passing second. That's when Maria stepped forward, her voice calm but firm as she addressed the general, reminding him that Private Chen had performed admirably on patrol and deserved respect, not humiliation. The words hung in the air like smoke from an IED explosion, and Morrison's face flushed red with rage at being challenged in front of his subordinates. His hand shot out faster than anyone could react, fingers tangling in Maria's dark hair, yanking her head back with such force that several soldiers instinctively stepped forward before catching themselves, remembering the weight of military hierarchy and the consequences of interfering with a general officer. But Maria Rodriguez wasn't just any soldier. She was a woman who'd spent her entire life fighting for respect in a man's world, who'd carried wounded comrades out of firefights, who'd stared down death in a dozen different forms, and never blinked. As Morrison's grip tightened, pulling her head back until she was forced to look up at the merciless desert sky, Maria did something that no one expected. She smiled. Not with humor, but with the quiet confidence of someone who'd finally found the hill worth dying on. Her voice, when it came, was steady as granite, carrying across the compound with crystal clarity. "Sir, you can break my back. You can end my career. You can destroy everything I've worked for. but you will never break my spirit, and you will never touch another one of my soldiers while I still draw breath." The effect was electric, rippling through the formation like lightning striking sand. Morrison's hand trembled with rage, his grip tightening until Maria's eyes watered. But she never looked away, never stopped smiling that terrible, beautiful smile of absolute defiance. Around them, 500 soldiers watched their brother-in-arms stand up to power with nothing but courage and conviction. And something fundamental shifted in the desert air. These were men and women who'd sworn an oath to protect and defend. But they'd been conditioned to follow orders without question, to swallow injustice for the sake of good order and discipline. But watching Maria Rodriguez refuse to bow, watching her sacrifice everything for what was right, they remembered what they'd really sworn to protect. Sergeant First Class Williams was the first to move, stepping out of formation with deliberate precision, his combat boots crunching on the gravel as he positioned himself directly behind Maria, his massive frame casting a shadow over both her and the general. Within seconds, others followed. Staff Sergeant Martinez, Corporal Thompson, Private First Class Jackson, soldiers from every unit on the base, forming a silent wall of solidarity behind their sister-in-arms. They said nothing, made no threats, but their message was unmistakable. If Morrison wanted to destroy Maria Rodriguez, he'd have to go through all of them. The standoff lasted an eternity compressed into heartbeats. Morrison's political mind calculating the cost of fighting 500 witnesses to his abuse of power. His hand released Maria's hair like he'd been burned, and he stepped back, his face pale with the realization that his reign of terror had just ended. Maria straightened slowly, her hair disheveled but her dignity intact. And when she spoke again, her words carried the weight of every veteran who'd ever been silenced. "We serve our country with honor, sir. All of us deserve to be treated with the same respect we show the flag we follow into battle." The investigation that followed Morrison's removal was swift and thorough, revealing a pattern of abuse that stretched back years. Dozens of careers destroyed by his unchecked power. Maria Rodriguez was quietly transferred to a new assignment, her personnel file noting her exceptional leadership under adverse conditions, though the full story would never appear in any official report. But in the places that matter, in the barracks where soldiers gather after missions, in the letters sent home to worried families, in the hearts of those who witnessed courage stand tall against corruption, Maria's story lives on. Years later, when Private Jenny Chen graduated from college and commissioned as an officer, she carried with her the memory of a staff sergeant who sacrificed everything to protect her dignity. When Sergeant Williams retired after 30 years of service, he told anyone who'd listen about the day he learned what leadership really meant. And Maria Rodriguez, now a civilian working with veteran support organizations, continues to fight for those who serve, knowing that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the simple, devastating power of standing up and refusing to be broken.